Hanson, Public Outreach Director of Georgia Women's Action for New Directions, or WAND. We are a women's empowerment organization that focuses on issues of peace and environmental justice across Georgia, including in those communities downwind and downstream of SRS on the Georgia side of the river. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to be here today on a day when we had two really good presentations on monitoring, including one from Georgia. I really appreciate that. And while I will be giving this presentation, it was co-designed by several stakeholders in the community. So I'm really trying to bring the voice of lots of folks who are concerned about monitoring and other issues around SRS. And so a lot of the work that we do in the area centers around environmental monitoring, which I'll talk about, access to information, both physical access to information as well as ability to interpret technical data, and then ultimately with the goal of safe and healthy and thriving communities. So this is a map of the central Savannah River area focusing on the Georgia communities that are near the site. So you can see Burt County here, Screven, Effingham, all areas in Georgia that are kind of downstream of the Savannah River Site that we work in. And as many of y'all know, several towns in South Carolina were moved when SRS was built, but the Georgia towns stayed where they were. And today, a lot of the perception or issues around the bomb plant, as it's known to folks in Georgia, center around lack of information. And so that's a big, one of our concerns and a big part of our work. And so we really work with the community to identify their concerns. Among them is environmental monitoring, water resources and quality, including the quality of the Savannah River as well as private drinking wells, economic stability in the area, which often means jobs. We know that sites like SRS and Plant Vogel in the area often come with the promise of jobs, but that's not always how it pans out. So in Burt County alone, the unemployment rate is about double that of the state of Georgia. And so we're not always seeing thriving communities economically as much as we would hope. Again, access to information and just a voice in the decision-making process. And monitoring, like I said, is one of the biggest concerns we're seeing. And Barty talked a lot about kind of the program that Georgia had, funding for the program and how it's run out. Georgia once had a very robust and comprehensive program. They weren't just monitoring water and air, but they were monitoring deer and fish and ponds and crabs and all those things that people ingest that could be very dangerous if they're contaminated. It started in 1989 when SRS requested DOE headquarters fund a program for monitoring and emergency preparedness around the site for South Carolina and Georgia, so both states, both sides of the river. In 1993, they entered into an agreement in principle, and it lasted for about a decade. Georgia did a great job, they had a great program, and the reports they put out were really important to the community in being able to address their concerns about what was going on in their backyard. In 2003, SRS told the state of Georgia that they were going to cut funding to the program. Georgia asked them to reconsider, but they did not. At that point, community groups led by Georgia One kind of sprung into action and led a grassroots campaign to try to keep the monitoring program in place because we knew how important it was to the community. And we were successful for a year. We worked with then Senator Charlie Norwood of Georgia, who found some money through his position on the Appropriations Committee to keep the program going, but it only lasted for a year. And so 2004 is the last year we have really data from this robust program. And since then, Georgia One has been working to restore the full program to what it was. Also, South Carolina still gets funding, so it's still going on there. It's not going on in Georgia, and this is really an issue of environmental injustice. And so we work on the ground with communities doing grassroots organizing. We advocate in DC to people in power and in groups like the CAB. And we also have had a very strong media element to the work. And in fact, CNN aired about a 5-minute spot about the Shell Bluff community, which is directly across from SRS, and their concerns about not having the monitoring program in place. After that aired, the Department of Energy in 2010 announced that they did intend to reinstate funds to help Georgia get this program back off the ground. But those funds have yet to be dispersed. And so for about 9 years now, we have not had this same level of monitoring and sampling that we've had before. And so folks are concerned. They're concerned from lack of information about what's going on now, and they're concerned from some of the findings and some of the past reports that Georgia has released. And so fish is a big issue. So panfish and catfish in the CSRA showed elevated levels of contaminants, about 15 milligram a year. Same with vegetation dose levels. Leafy greens in Richmond counties in 2 different locations had elevated levels and were about 15 milligram a year. Residential wells are one of the things that people are most concerned about. They're really, really concerned about their drinking water. One of the wells at the DeLable Trailer Park, shown here, had found levels of tritium in it several years ago, and that was part of the SRS monitoring program. It's since been resolved, but the issue of tritium is a really big one. We know it contaminates water, you can't see it, you can't smell it, and people are concerned. And in the last report Georgia EPD released, they said that there were elevated levels of tritium in almost all media they tested, and that 90% of that tritium was coming from activities at SRS. So there's a real problem that we need to address. Maybe it's not anymore, we don't know because we don't have all the information, but it's a huge concern and folks are worried. And so if we think about what this means for the community, we know from the National Academy of Sciences report, the biological effects of ionizing radiation, that there's no real safe dose of radiation. The more we get, the higher our risk is. And so if you're continuously getting low levels of contaminants, it really increases your risks. In addition, if you're getting multiple pathways, say you're eating a lot of fish and a lot of leafy vegetation, and possibly you're getting it from other things like the air or the water, it multiplies your risk. And so there's a huge health risk and health concern. And in addition, folks are worried that with SRS in an area where there's other sites that are polluters, like Plant Bogle or International Paper or other chemical plants, they're worried about the economic viability of a community that could develop a reputation for being very toxic. And so that kind of adds to the concerns about health and safety and long-term ability to remain in the area and to thrive. And so moving forward, Georgia One continues to work on getting the funding back for monitoring in Georgia for a comprehensive program independent of SRS. But we want it to be community-based because if folks don't have access to information, if they don't know how to interpret it, if they aren't getting the jobs that they need, if they don't trust the government because they don't know what's going on, then the biggest solution to this problem is to have them be involved. And so I was really happy actually to hear you mention local colleges, Nina, because that could be one of the paths forward, especially working with maybe HBCUs in the area or colleges like Payne and others where we can really involve the community and have a ground-up program. And also support our state, who has done a great job on the monitoring and deserves the funding back. Easier access to the community for information, to the CAB. An epidemiological study is also something that folks are really interested in getting in the area. They want to know why cancer rates seem so high and why no one has really knocked on their doors and asked them what's going on and spearheaded a study. So that's something folks are concerned about. That we would advocate for in the future. And also people want to know if more waste comes to SRS, which I know is going to be discussed later, not just what will it mean for the site and the economic feasibility, but what will it mean for the health of the community. And that's one thing that folks are very concerned about. In terms of access to information, we believe that a lot of folks are getting left behind because they don't have consistent access to the internet and often consistent access to cell phones. And so it's important to kind of go where the people are rather than expect that they'll find ways to where the information might be hidden. And so that means working with local churches and libraries, working with local publications like the Waynesboro True Citizens and others, considering putting this kind of information about contaminants in fishing guides where people are looking for information about what's going on in the river, and then working through community organizations. There are several in the area. Georgia Wand is one of many, but we do have a very comprehensive citizens action guide that focuses on the CSRA and what's going on at SRS. It was co-designed by the community to answer their concerns and also provide information about how they can get involved in things like the CAB and other organizations. So we just really look forward to continuing our work with the CAB to build bridges of trust and communication and kind of strengthen all of the communities in the CSRA that live around the Savannah River Site. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. My contact information is also right here.
Kathy Golden-Cap, I have a very quick question. As Gail stated in her presentation, a lot of the monitoring that does happen in South Carolina is funded by the state of South Carolina through South Carolina DHEC. Is your organization working at all lobbying in Atlanta to get state funds with this?
We work mostly with the Department of Energy within their budget in the Office of Environmental Management. I think a lot of the money to South Carolina is also coming down from DOE, but I could be mistaken. As I understand, as it worked before, DOE EM allocated funds to Georgia, who then did the program. But yeah, certainly we are open to pursuing creative ways of funding because it doesn't matter as much where the money is coming from to a certain extent, but it matters that the monitoring is happening, that the folks feel secure and that they understand the information that's coming out.
Courtney, Bill Calhoun with CAB. What kind of money are we looking at for Barty to have this organization up and running again on an annual basis?
That's a great question. So the last year that it was funded, it was about $300,000, but that was not at the full level. And of course, it would take more, much more, to get the program back off the ground after the boats have been in dry dock for 10 years and it hasn't been as active. So I think Barty could better answer that question, but my guess would be more than $750,000 a year. Well over.
This one is from CAB. Courtney, great report. One thing that I would add to what you illustrated here was that your outreach should include community-based organizations. I know the last time we spoke some months ago, we talked about churches, so I'm glad to see that you had that there, but community-based organizations are important. Let me ask the question that I was trying to ask before. Maybe you have a different perspective on this. Regarding the fact that you have several agencies that are doing monitoring or have been doing monitoring over the last decade or so, would you, in your opinion or your organization's opinion, think that there should be greater collaboration vis-a-vis the funding? Because again, rather than waiting for funding to occur, monitoring is not happening in some cases. That's just my assumption. Where do you think collaboration would help to reach those voids?
I think that collaboration has happened in the past, but I also feel like from a community trust standpoint, folks are apt to be more trusting of a program that's independent. So that they know who's funding it, they know who's doing it, and they know that no one's interests are vested in any sort of outcome of the